I was actually a makeup artist by trade. I worked at New York Fashion Week, did Australian Fashion Week, did Usher's makeup, had this incredibly rich, amazing kind of makeup career, but also found that I was wildly mentally understimulated. Then my dad died suddenly, and as you have those big reflections on life, I decided to start a business.
Accounting roles, call center roles, frontline roles, which are partly being replaced by AI tools or AI bots. How do you see the cultural evolution of those organizations?
Fearful of technology and AI taking jobs. That was a big discussion maybe 2 years ago in the HR kind of field. Is AI going to take all of our jobs? And everyone's kind of running around with their hands in the air. Essentially, it's going to take over a bunch of jobs that exist now, yes, but a bunch of new jobs are going to be created that we don't even know exist right now. So it's about helping people understand and cultivate curiosity about opportunity. Humans that are in the workforce in that context will not be doing technical work. They will not be doing processing work. They will not be doing a lot of manual work. They will largely be problem solving. They will largely be strategizing. They will be being, agile kind of decision making. I think the routine stuff is going to be automated and managed by AI, within our careers for sure. Where are we getting that real human connection, the stuff that makes the day really rich and meaningful? We've already seen a big rise in mental illness, mental health issues, social isolation off the back of COVID, and that's really stuck around. It hasn't gotten much better.
Most of the workforce now lives on LinkedIn. So social media is Instagram, whereas LinkedIn for me is a professional media. What other things would make you cringe on LinkedIn?
It's tricky because everyone's got a different personal brand, right? I think oversharing is probably a cringe for me when it starts to get really far away from a professional context.
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you.
Welcome, Kat. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Doing
well. I've been thinking of talking to you from point of view of culture, branding, and the whole spectrum of HR and the evolution of HR. To be OD or org psych, whatever you want to call it, but that's what intrigued me to talk to you today. And if you can share your background and a bit of history before we delve into specifics of org psych.
Sure. Sounds like we've got a lot to cover. So look, I kind of fell into HR, really. It was a bit of an unexpected career path. I was actually a makeup artist by trade. Weirdly enough. So I left school, studied makeup, ended up traveling around, worked at New York Fashion Week, did Australian Fashion Week, did Usher's makeup, had this incredibly rich, amazing kind of makeup career, but also found that I was wildly mentally understimulated. Like it just wasn't mentally interesting enough, even though it was quite outwardly interesting. So I became a makeup teacher and then went and did my adult education degree. So very weird kind of angle into HR. So did adult education degree, so quite a specialist degree, and then went into corporate learning and development. So started off at cash converters, teaching the store managers around leadership and management, communication, time management, all the really good stuff. Helped them implement their LMS, moved into an organisational development manager role. And then my boss moved to Bay Corp and I followed him there, took on a global OD role, which was super fun, spending time in the Philippines and New Zealand and basically building a lot of the programs from the ground up. So it was the perfect kind of playpen to do all that fun stuff. And then from there, spent a couple of years at Department of Health as Director of Learning and Development. Then went to MNG as General Manager of Strategy, Brand and Culture, so kind of broadened it out a bit, came out of the pure kind of HR, more L&D, OD, and really looked after HR, safety, brand, marketing, and organisational strategy, which was a really great role because these things don't exist in a vacuum. HR isn't really that separate from marketing. And those two things are key enablers of strategy, right? So by bringing those together, we're able to design the new organisational strategy and really embed it in a way that I've not seen it done elsewhere. So that was probably my favourite corporate role. But then my dad died suddenly, and as you have, those big reflections on life and what's important to you. And, I always said at some point I'd start my own business, but I kind of pictured when I was 50 and my mortgage was paid off, was probably going to be a good time. I decided to, with one of my best friends, Alex, start a business because, there's no better way to avoid your grief than starting a startup business.
Add more grief.
Exactly. I just
Let
delayed.
me pile it on. How silly I can be, how sad I can be. I want to cry
100%.
every damn day.
Let's just delay it and pile more stress on top of it was basically my strategy at the time. So it came out of a weird time, but we started it as a bit of a side hustle, Zest, and then it grew legs quite quickly, so to say. So within a year, we'd both transitioned out of our full-time jobs. We'd hired, I think, 3 or 4 staff members by that point. And now we're in our 3rd year and we've hit the 7-figure mark. So it's been quite the journey, but it's so fun because inherently we're here to do HR differently because there's a gap. There's a gap between often what HR departments think the business needs and what the executive teams actually need. And being able to bridge those two is really the thing that kind of drives us. How do we have commercially grounded, savvy, operationally connected HR that isn't kind of hiding behind excessive, policy, bureaucracy and making people's lives harder. We don't want to be getting in the way. We want to be enabling organisations to do what they do best, which is their core business, right? So yeah, best ride of my life so far.
I don't think so. It's a weird kind of connection between being a makeup artist, dressing up a human or a person, to dressing up an organization.
Yeah.
Can you draw some parallels for me between being a makeup artist and being the HR lead for an organization?
You know what? I think I learned from that, probably 2 main things that carried with me from that time. How to talk to people. Often as when you're doing someone's makeup, it could be their wedding day, so they're freaking out and they're nervous because it's their big day, or it's a model about to go out on the catwalk who has giant shoes and they're worried, that they're not going to make it, to someone who's got really low self-confidence and has come to see you to try and feel better. So you're in people's spaces, you're seeing them in a relatively vulnerable space. So building rapport, making people feel at ease. I think that was a great learning ground for me as a young person to build those skills, and that's really carried, I think, through my career. And the other one is I will never stop caring about aesthetics. We've just done a rebrand at Zest. I literally have the merch in my bag, so I'm showing everyone that I can. But I think that's important, right? How you visually show up as a business and as a brand says so much about who you are. And it's not only just about standing out, but it's about knowing what your purpose is, why you exist, and how can you demonstrate that through everything that you do. So my attention to detail on how things look and how they're presented is very, very high. And I think that comes from caring about the finer details as a makeup artist. Other than that, I'm not sure much came across with me.
I think people management and people skills and understanding people at a very intimate level, I think that's powerful. It's easier to do one-to-many conversation probably, but it's difficult to do one-to-one conversation because that's where the flaws come up. Whereas in one-to-many, one could hide behind so much. So I think that's what you learned very well, one-to-one.
And I mean, that's a big part of HR, right? Whether it's you might be making someone redundant, there might be someone who's been having a pattern of sickness and you need to have a conversation with them to try and find out what's going on and how the organisation can, provide supports or, adapt. And they can be really tough conversations. I've had some really tough conversations with individuals who've shared all sorts of things, So being able to be empathetic and sit in that space and support them through that, but also maintain enough distance that you can kind of navigate through that situation. It's a very complex skill set, and I think we don't give enough recognition to the emotional load that our HR folks carry in organisations, because they are the ones who are having these conversations, who the staff are telling about these things. So how do we give them a little bit more space to acknowledge and deal with some of that emotional load that they carry?
So why does there's a myth which exists that HR people are not, as in generally speaking, people don't have a strong opinion of HR people?
I think it's...
Why is that the case?
I think it's there's a bit of the historical piece, I think historically HR was the personnel department. It was quite transactional. It wasn't strategic.
Industrial relations.
It was seen as very much, the enforcer of the employer. I believe that's evolved a lot recently. If we look at the closing the loopholes legislations, the stuff that Labor's brought in, and generally the way we're shifting as a society, people want to bring their whole selves to work. And what I actually find is probably more of the challenge is managers or senior leaders who've grown up in organisations and are used to a more corporate, maybe authoritarian, maybe didactic kind of model, who are now faced with a cohort of employees in the room, in their organisation, who want to talk about emotions and who want work-life integration and who see the world really, really differently. So I would say that the biggest theme that I'm seeing at the moment is a real challenge for people around how do I navigate the expectations of the younger generation who are coming into the organisation when it's not what I've seen and what I've known and I don't know how to adapt. I feel like I totally avoided why HR people are seen as the bad guy. But the other reason I would say potentially for that is maybe they've had a bad experience. You have one bad experience with a HR function that is quite, not empathetic, not holistic, and you tend to carry that with you. But I don't know, the folks I see are mostly doing really good stuff.
What are the most recent trends you are observing in terms of employees or staff members across different sectors are asking of their organizations? Is there a generational divide across generations? So what are the key insights which are coming these days?
The generational piece is huge. So that kind of links back to what I was talking about before. We've got, your baby boomers in the workplace, often in senior leadership roles, but also within your workforce kind of cohort. And as a generalisation, every person is unique. They don't need a lot of management. They're very autonomous. They're happy to get on with things. They don't need to be told, given as much praise, and they're really happy with that. Good work ethic, just crack on. Then you've got your X and your Y generation who wanted to bring a little bit more of their whole self to work, tend to be quite driven, tend to want to progress. And then you've got your Gen Z who kind of, were coming of age professionally through COVID, right? And so they spent their kind of formative professional years at home, working remotely, a big focus on, mental health, and rightly so, and they've actually brought that thinking with them into the workplace. And there's been a little bit of I wouldn't say a clash because it's not always conflict-based. It's more just a bit of confusion. We see people look at each other and go, I don't understand the perspective that you're coming from. So I find me and my team and the other HR folks I know spend a lot of time with those different generations, helping them navigate how to connect with each other and how to see not just the bits that maybe annoy about the different generations, but let's tap into the wisdom because, man, each generation brings a range of really strong skills, and that's what makes a really effective organisation. What we want to be really conscious of is not having too much of a homogenous group, because then we miss out on pragmatism, experience and wisdom, or we miss out on tech savvy and emotional intelligence, right? So there's definite benefits kind of across that, but it's about taking a step back and reconsidering how we interact with some of the people around us. So that's probably a key one. Flexibility. I think that's, that is here to stay. People have had a taste of being able to integrate their work and their life and work in a way that better suits them, and they're not going to let it go. That's my view, but it's also what I'm seeing. The organisations that are really hardline on return to work, some people are happy to do that, and certain generations are probably more comfortable with that, but we do see those who have flexible work policies, maybe hybrid, maybe, and flexible work isn't just work from home. It can be staggered hours. It could be compressed work weeks. There's all sorts of different ways we can do this, because there's often the question around, nurses on the front line, they can't work from home. Of course they can't. But what could we do? Could we give them 9-day fortnights and give them a bit of flexibility back like that? So we've got to be creative about how we think about this, because as as the war for talent continues to increase, finding the right people gets increasingly difficult, and we can't keep throwing money continuously at people. So what can we negotiate with? And I have this conversation particularly with more of our mid-sized clients who don't have limitless budgets. What can you come to the party with? What's going to make you a really appealing employer? But what that requires is a different way of managing and leading. And that's the challenge, because instead of being able to see performance, capability and deliverables because you're walking past and you can see what's going on, you've got to measure that differently. So being really clear on what an output is, what good looks like, having some checks and balances on how you do that. The Zest team is pretty much entirely remote. We have an office, but the team kind of work where suits them. That's very much our policy. And we're deliverables based, and the team, I've never had to really, I think I've put one job out up once because people are like, hey, can I come work for you guys? Because they can drop the kids off at school. Then they can do their client meetings. Then they can do the after school stuff. And then they can log on later and maybe, finish up some reports or whatever. So, I always want to continue to challenge the narrative around that. We had a structure, and that was essentially went in place when there was generally in most households one person that went to work and one person who managed a household. Now both people are at work, they're managing a household and children and increasing demands and often, aging parents. So we need to rethink the way we work to help people thrive, because at the moment we're seeing increased stress, burnout, all of these kind of things. And I don't always think our work context has set people up for success. So organisations that get that right, I think are going to do really well in the war for talent.
War for talent. But I'll come to that one. Before that, you used the word bringing yourself to work, all of yourself to work. I want you to elaborate that one, but from a nuance of, because many organizations have their own core purpose and objectives why they exist. And some people or some groups of people who would bring their whole self, and they might have some other agendas as an individual. They might be an activist of some kind. But organizations are not activist organizations. They have a purpose, core deliverables, they have the people they serve, whereas they're not there to run either political activism of any sorts. But they might be funded by taxpayers' money because they are not-for-profits, charities. And you would see that many organizations are led by some groups of people who are also doing a bit of political activism, or some kind of activism, if not political. But the core objective of the organization is very different. To serve some other people, but everybody gets into the sway of, and then one would have wondered that, that's taxpayers' money being used to run a campaign or use employee productivity towards something else. So how do you see bringing yourself to work in those scenarios?
They're interesting contexts. So there's probably a couple of things. First of all, as long as humans are in a workplace, there's always going to be
as long as humans, as in? What do you mean by that?
Well, until the day that, technology and AI does everything and we can all just, pursue our hobbies. I'm listening to Homo Deus at the moment by Yuval Noah Harari, which talks about the future like that. But as long as people are around, we're going to have multiple things driving us. That's inherently who we are. We are multi-layered, complex human beings, right? In every organisation, you have to uphold the integrity and the ethics of what that organisation stands for. So things like having your purpose defined, having your values defined, having your behaviours defined, really critical. Because if you don't have that, being able to call out the wrong thing is really hard. Leaders need to demonstrate this. They need to lead by example. So if we're seeing behaviours, even if they're not inherently terrible, if they're not aligned with the organisation, your entire staff group is not going to be aligned with the organisation. So we have to get that culture right from the top. So there's that piece. Probably what I would say is this is why for me, recruiting for culture fit is far more important than for technical skills. And those who are in really technical roles will obviously disagree with me. That's totally fine. But I would rather someone who has a slightly lower technical skill set, but is a really good cultural fit for the organisation. And when I say cultural fit, it's exactly the point that you've made. They're aligned to the purpose. They care about it. It means something to them. They have a good, strong values alignment. They believe in whatever it is the organisation is doing, because then you are going to get focus on that, that outcome, that direction. I think organisations can lose their way, individuals can lose their way, teams can lose their way. And that will happen from time to time. You know, we see it around. I see it in the work I do, and we also see it in the newspaper sometimes. But it's about how we bring it back. How do we have the checks and balances to know why we are here? Why do we exist? How are we talking about that regularly? How are we having that conversation with our staff members? How are we linking their everyday behaviours to the core purpose of the organisation? So what we generally recommend, and what I like to talk to people about, is when we're doing performance reviews, and you know, a lot of people eye roll about performance reviews because they're often done really terribly, right? And I get it. So a terrible performance review process isn't going to be no fun, and you're not going to want to take part in it. But a good performance review process focuses on organisational purpose, values, behaviours, and some KPIs and metrics, right? And there's discussion around not just what you're delivering, but how you're showing up every day. The attitude that you bring, the contribution. Are you an upstander, you know, if there's poor behaviour or something? And it's about having these conversations regularly. It's not once or twice a year sitting down and going, okay, it's performance review time. I've ignored talking to you about this stuff all year and now we're going to talk about it. It's about continuous communication. It's about the manager building enough rapport with their team member that they can give them feedback on a regular basis, creating a safe feedback culture. There was an article by Professor Gary Martin from AIM this week that he talked about bubble wrapping employees. You know, we're too scared to give them feedback. And, you know, there's talk about that Gen Z not being comfortable to give and receive feedback. But it's a muscle we all have to build. I've gone into many organisations where they're scared of, you know, giving any kind of feedback, even if it's not that serious. But you just start doing it, and it takes the sting out of it, and you do it in a supportive way. You set the context to say, I want to see you succeed. I think you've got some really great skills. You're excelling in this area, but you know what I want to work on with you is this area and this area. So let's team up and see what we can do about that. That's really different than me sitting down with you and going, you know what, Dev, you know, you're not performing in this area. Of course, if you've left it and things have gotten really bad, you'll have to have that conversation. But you can avoid doing that if you're proactive and you work with a person. Most people are inherently good and want to do the right thing. There's a few bad apples, but for the most part, most people want to come on that journey, but they're not getting the right feedback, guidance and support from their managers. Manager avoids it because they're too scared to have a conversation, and then it becomes a big issue. And then we get a phone call and go, hey, Zest, can you help us deal with a people issue, right? So what I encourage anyone who has a team members, communicate regularly, give regular bits of feedback, give plenty of positive feedback. You know, when they're killing it, tell them they're killing it. High fives all round. So then when you have to go, but you know what I didn't love? I didn't love this part of the thing. They go, oh, okay, you know, and it doesn't sting in the same way. Whereas if you haven't said anything for 6 months and then it's a big deal, of course they're going to react poorly. So feedback culture.
Talk about the elephant. And an elephant is a big one then after 6 months. From there on, when the workplace from some kind of roles which are very homogenous and at scale, like either it's accounting roles or call center roles or frontline roles, which are partly being replaced by, you know, AI tools or AI bots, and that kind of a hybrid workspace in which you are working with humans and AI bots. How do you see the cultural evolution of those organizations in terms of when you are, as an organization, the culture is part machine and part human?
That's interesting. I think the first challenge we're going to have is the workforce becoming less fearful of technology and AI taking jobs. You know, that was a big discussion maybe 2 years ago in the HR kind of field. You know, everyone's like, is AI going to take all of our jobs? And everyone's kind of running around with their hands in the air. But fundamentally, it's going to take over a bunch of jobs that exist now, yes, but a bunch of new jobs are going to be created that we don't even know exist right now. So it's about helping people understand and cultivate curiosity about opportunity. So I think that's the first thing, is we need to overcome the hurdle about, you know, human versus AI in the workplace. And help educate people and help them understand the benefits and how we can work on that. In terms of how you create culture in a hybrid AI human context, I love that. I love that question. I haven't given it as much thought, but I'm definitely going to now.
You can think aloud.
Thank you. I think there's going to need to be a lot of people doing culture work in that space, right? So I think there's going to be the humans that are in the workforce in that context will not be doing technical work. They will not be doing processing work. They will not be doing a lot of manual work. They will largely be problem solving. They will largely be strategizing. They will be being, agile kind of decision making. So, and there's a lot of stats at the moment around, if we look at, like World Economic Forum and people like that, looking at what the skills are right now, the most highly valued skills and what they're going to be, 2030, 2050 kind of thing. It goes from, communication, problem solving here to agility, to operating in ambiguity, to high levels of tech literacy. So helping individuals navigate that change, because I think it's going to come quite quickly. I think the routine stuff is going to be automated and managed by AI, within our careers for sure. So how do we support the individuals to build the skill sets that they're going to need moving forward? And that they are high order skill sets. Mm-hmm. They are not super easy. They are not things that everyone naturally is really good at. So helping humans build that capability is going to be a real human job, I think. And in terms of, if I'm thinking about workforce dynamics around AI interacting with humans and what some of the risks and challenges are going to be there, I worry about social isolation. I worry about increasing withdrawal from community, I think that's a risk because, we're going to be able to work remotely. We're going to be able to mainly interact with, AI in our workday. So where are we getting the human connection, the stuff that makes the day really rich and meaningful? Mm-hmm. So I think that would be, along with, I'm sure, a range of, potentially legal compliance, governance kind of risks. I think there's a real social, mental health, well-being kind of component to that that I think we're going to have to manage carefully. Because we've already seen a big rise in mental illness, mental health issues, social isolation off the back of COVID, and that's really stuck around. It hasn't gotten much better. And what's that going to look like as our world continues to change and evolve? I always go back to the movie, the little movie WALL-E. You remember did you see the movie WALL-E? Yeah. And all the humans are in their little hovercraft chairs looking at screens. So when we're not needed, to your point from earlier, when we're not all needed to work because potentially technology is doing a lot of that, how do we find purpose? How do we make our days fulfilling? That creates a lot of opportunity, and we can evolve art and philosophy and thinking, but we have to be conscious of that and not passive in that process. Mm-hmm. So I think taking the opportunity to span out the next 50 to 100 years of what the world of work and life is going to look like, and start building how we create a thriving society in a vastly different context.
As you've matured across your work, across young age, currently the work what AI is taking over is the entry-level jobs. Mm-hmm. And people who are using AI, they can ask the right questions and they can guide AI to the right pathway. Mm. But that intelligence comes through by doing. So I was an intern first, then I matured to a junior level assistant, and then a manager and senior level manager. But somebody had invested in me, my managers, to teach me what is right and wrong. Hence, today I can see, okay, this output is not good. I'll have to go back and change the output. Yeah. So for the younger workforce who are just graduating out, and if all the entry-level jobs are not accessible right now or not available or reducing in number, one is there's more supply for the same kind of roles. One is that. And then second, there's that opportunity for that learning experience for an individual or employee to mature with time. With 1 year of experience or 3 years of experience, that's gone. The first 3-5 years of experience, which one would learn by making mistakes and then knowing what's right, or being mentored in many ways and form, that's gone now. So for people who are young coming out as graduates, how would they learn how to prompt an AI?
Yeah. I think the generations coming through are going to be more native with that. I think they're going to know what, even my little brother would be like, when he was 12, he'd be like, oh, you just do this and this and this and this on the computer and phone. And I'd be like, what? I mean, he's only 6 years younger than me, So I think in terms of knowing what prompts to ask, I think they'll be digital natives, and I think they'll probably be better than us at that. What I think is the risk is the ability to discern accuracy and quality of information coming back. So critical thinking skills is probably one of the most important skill sets, particularly for that cohort. I mean, for all of us, and particularly in a world of mis and disinformation. I think there's going to be potentially less entry-level roles available, and I think that's a real risk, right? Because we need to be building the pipeline for work, because we're screaming for, advanced individuals in pretty much every field. But if we're not filling in at the bottom, we're not going to have enough. So organisations need to be prepared to invest in early level talent. But I think when they do come in, I think it basically is still the model. But I think what they're learning is less about let's spend a day researching, doing a Google or whatever about whatever topic. And it's more about you've gathered the data quickly, and the coaching and the mentoring from the manager is coming from how do we discern what's good? How do we synthesize this? How do we make it meaningful? So it's probably those higher level thinking skills, I think, is what they're going to be mentored on and learn on the job, right? So it's less data collection, and really I don't know if it matters how that data was collected, as long as it's the right data and it's going to help us, deliver what we need to. And if we can make that easier, great. But what we need to do is make sure that the individuals who are doing that process for us know how to distinguish and discern what's good. And I guess to your point, you're saying they would know that because they've read the stuff before, but we're going to have to use different skills to be able to do that now. So how is it that we cross-reference? How do we check? How do we apply critical thinking and go, this doesn't look right, I'm going to investigate further? But I think humans are always going to want to support and train the individuals coming in. We've just got to make sure there's enough opportunity for them.
And that one step before getting into being a graduate, the education system was built for more of a large-scale traditional skills point of view. And how fast the education system is evolving, how fast, because you are interacting with young people through recruitment process. What are you seeing changes in terms of what skills are there and what skills are there not?
When new grads are joining organisations, what skills do they have and not have?
Yeah.
Well, they have great tech skills, so tech, and they're normally teaching everyone else. They're the one everyone in the organisation asks questions to. I would say what I'm seeing in those generations is probably a little bit of how to troubleshoot, how to pivot, to use that buzzword, how to be really adaptable when things don't go to plan, because in organisations they don't, We have this, then that pops up, and all of a sudden it changes. So I think that's going to come with life experience. Sometimes some of the human skills, a bit of conflict aversion I tend to see in some of those generations, because again, probably they've been interacting a bit more through screens as opposed to, having to fight over the coffee cups in the office with Bob or whoever. So I've found personally that I've had to do a bit more work when they've been on my team around, no, it's okay to stand up for yourself. This is how you have that conversation. This is how you hold someone accountable. This is how you push back. So there's a little bit more flexing in on that kind of assertiveness and those, I guess, harder kind of people skills. And when you talked about the changing kind of education system and university sector, I think that's going to be an interesting space to watch. I'm not going to pretend to be at all an expert on tertiary education, but I think the gap between what people are learning in tertiary institutions and being totally workforce ready has gotten bigger probably over the last 10 years or so. So I'm really excited to see what the movers and shakers in that area do to start to reduce that gap. And I think a big part of that is partnership with industry. The tertiary sector can feel very separate and operate quite separately in some instances. So the more we interlink, the more we are hand in glove, and the more we're helping the tertiary sector understand what the real realities of business and the workplace are right now, the better quality we're going to get in terms of graduates. So I think it's on both sides to kind of come together and bridge that gap.
use the word war on recruitment and cultural fit.
Yeah.
But as an organization defines their own culture, and culture should evolve with times and then culture should be reflective of that day of organizing, what the organization, who they are serving, and then what's the end objectives or purpose of the organization. So how do you see culture playing a critical role in terms of saying no to people?
Through the recruitment process, is that what you mean?
And broader strategy.
Saying no to someone in the recruitment process purely based on culture fit is not a great thing to do, because how do you quantify that, right? So I like to use culture fit when you've got people who have comparable skills, and then I use that the culture fit piece as kind of the icing on the top, right? So it's important that we can still demonstrate fit for the job and best person for the job. The risk also with thinking too much about culture fit is we can end up with a homogenous group. We tend to hire more people like us because they're a good culture fit, right? Like, yeah, they like the same things I do. But that doesn't create effective workplaces. We want diversity of thought. We want diversity of perspective. That's where you get rich depth and discussion. So that's about coming back to purpose of the organisation, not you look like me, you sound like me, you like the same things as me. We do the same things on the weekend. So being very conscious of what that means when we talk about culture fit through recruitment, really critical, really, really critical. And there's a bunch of research out there that demonstrates how important diverse teams and diverse thinking is. In the organisation, once we're kind of in organisations, it's about just coming back again to kind of purpose, right? So once people are in there, refocusing on the thing that matters. And I think what organisations often don't do well is they have a purpose, it's printed, they talk about it in induction, and then it like goes in a pretty document in the cupboard somewhere, and it's not really integrated into the day-to-day. The organisations who are doing it well, you can hear it. People are walking around and they are using the language, health people, amazing care, changing lives one conversation at a time. They're some of the purpose statements of organisations I've worked at. And you hear people talking about it. It's in the vernacular. People are using it to help inform decision-making. So I think the litmus test is getting your purpose right, like actually being able to quantify that well as an organisation, and then not just printing it on a pretty sign and leaving it on the wall, but embedding that in how we do things around here. And leaders can lead by example in that way. You're in a meeting and you're making a decision. Okay, well, how does this come back to healthy people, amazing care? How does this come back to, creating thriving workplaces, and using that as the grounding and a steering point in decision making helps people make it real, because otherwise you have to create the connections for the people around you, because otherwise they won't see how what they do every day links to purpose unless you help make that connection.
Can we do a think aloud case study right now?
Sure.
So the one big organisation, the Parliament of Australia.
Okay.
Their sole purpose is to deliver good quality outcomes for Australians, to be fair to all Australians, provide equity and equality to all Australians. That's their broader objective and purpose. I haven't read that, but I think that should be generally. It's
a pretend case study.
Yes,
so that's our
and so to deliver that outcome, you would assume that you would have the right people in the team. So you have political parties who their culture is, I will hire or have people in my team who will think like me, might not look like me, but who will think like me and behave like me. And you have multiple homogenous groups coming together. And then they are trying to deliver an outcome, which is they both agree, but multiple groups agree that that's the outcome they want to achieve, but everybody has a different means of achieving that. And you can see the theatre at the Parliament House through the question time and through daily live streams from the Parliament House, upper house and the lower house both. So how do you see the cultural perspective and the HR perspective there, that how it's functioning, dysfunctioning, highly dysfunctioning, neutral?
Oh, I would not say I am an expert.
If you have to be given the assignment to fix it.
Well, I would spend a couple of months doing deep research and better understanding my context, just as a caveat. But I think that's That's essentially, if you're wanting to create high-performing teams, highly functioning teams that are going to deliver organisational purpose, for me as a consultant externally, you need to deeply understand the context, right? So whenever I do a lot of big transformation projects, a lot of government work. We spend a lot of time, you do your desktop review and all that kind of stuff, and we spend a lot of time talking to people. What's it actually like around here? Individually, in groups, observing meetings, observing interactions, getting a sense of how people feel. Part of that is building trust. So that comes back to those interpersonal skills before. We often don't have long with individuals, and so to make them feel comfortable enough to take a bit of a personal risk and go, I don't think this is okay in my organisation, or this process isn't working, or whatever it is. So how do we create kind of safety to get some real kind of data around that? And then it's about the readiness in the organisation. And sometimes you do have to let people go in an organisation. Sometimes sometimes there is someone, you can work with them and you can try and take them on the journey, but if they are inherently working against the organisation, they do not believe in the purpose, they are deeply disruptive to culture, they are not performing, the impact that has on everyone around them is massive, right? Again, most people are trying to do the right thing. I fundamentally believe that, and I've seen it. So when you do have someone who just is not, avoiding dealing with that is the thing that's going to poison a much bigger culture.
To add to the context, you can't push people out in the Parliament of Australia. If they are bad actors, they are bad actors for the whole term.
Yes. Which is why I'm probably never going to pick up a project with them. No, I mean, that's a very unique situation, right? Because most organisations, whether or not they have a different risk tolerance to whether or not they're prepared to performance manage or terminate people, but sometimes the right thing to do is to deal with the situation. I guess in those contexts, it's up to the leader of the party or of the group to have some very honest conversations around behaviour, accountability, what's expected, and then if there is things like unethical behaviour or gross misconduct, then I'm sure there are still avenues where that can be dealt with, right? It's not as easy, but there still has to be recourse because you have to be able to uphold a fundamental standard of behaviour to enable your culture and to enable you to deliver.
But what about when this group is part of the same team and the whole play and there are multiple factions in the group and the whole play is how do we topple off the leader and then have our leader put in place? So how do you see that dynamics playing in the organisation, quality of outcomes?
Having different factions in workplaces is not uncommon, that in dysfunctional workplaces, to be fair. And even a healthy, you tend to have little cliques and stuff and, people like to find their tribe and kind of do that stuff. So I think it's not uncommon to have cliques or groups or factions. What is unhealthy is when they are working against each other because instead of delivering what the organisation needs, their energy is focused on fighting a war between themselves, and that's not going to help anyone. And again, that comes back to leadership, accountability, holding people responsible. There's the quote, the behaviour you walk past is the behaviour you accept. So, as a leader, again, kind of to my earlier point, like once you start seeing dysfunction, addressing it immediately. That's not how we do things as a group. We need to redefine this. We need to be working towards the same objectives. I need your commitment on this. Let's talk about what that looks like. Catching that early and redirecting is the best thing that you can do. You don't want to leave it to the point where you have factions and things aren't getting done because people are too focused on those things. But yeah, I don't ever want to really be in a context where you can't truly hold someone accountable. So I'm going to pass on that.
Okay. So we're not thinking aloud here, he's holding on to that one. Coming back on the idea of how do you bring branding and culture together and how is those conversations to be had in terms of org strategy as a broader org strategy and there are multiple subsections of the operations plan and operations strategy. How do you see branding or brand strategy or the way people see us and the kind of people we want in the room? How does these two conversations happen together?
I think they are two sides of the same coin for me. And I'm surprised, there's some organisations I've seen in Perth, we've got a few chief brand and culture officers, a few of those kind of roles starting to pop up. So we're starting to see some organisations see that connectivity. But if you think about it, brand is how you outwardly talk about who you are as a business, and your culture is who you are as a business every day. And whether you're talking to your clients or your customers or your potential staff members, it's when these two things don't connect that there's dissonance, right? So you can't be saying as a brand, we're this, we're that, we're whatever, and then when either a client works with you or a staff member joins, that's not their experience, because you've already disappointed them. You've already kind of started on the back foot. So there's got to be they have to be realistic, and they have to reflect each other. But what tends to happen in a more, traditional organisation is you have, brand and marketing over here, and you have people and culture over here. And brand and marketing tends to focus more on, client acquisition, all that kind of stuff, and rightly so. And your internal P&C teams are culture and compliance, essentially. How do we start to bring those kind of intents together? Because in an increasingly digitally connected world, your potential staff members, your potential customers and clients are watching your social media, they're watching any news stories that come out about you, but they're also watching what, so-and-so who they follow on Insta, who works there, feels about their job, and all these kind of things. So the lines between the two have inherently blurred, and people will take more seriously what the real people say as opposed to what the branding says, right? So how do we better connect how we're talking about ourselves outwardly to what our reality is? And often we have really high ideals here, but it's not maybe hitting over here because, people are complex and change is hard and people struggle, right? And that's totally valid. So I think one of the things I care a lot about is bringing that together. So how do we speak realistically about where we're at? It's still in a positive way and promoting what's awesome about us, but not overstating who we are and what we do and how we show up. So that better connects with individuals here, because you want your individuals in your organisation to feel a sense of connection to that. They want to feel a sense of connection to how their brand is perceived in the world. They want it to reflect their experience. And that happens in so many ways. That's the quality of the leader that you have. That's your work design. That's your recruitment experience. It's your opportunity for growth and development. So all of these things are the real test of what we're saying kind of outwardly there. And to bring it back to the strategy piece, your strategy can't be delivered without people in your team to work on it and deliver it, and for the outside world to understand and know what that is. So they are the real connectors outwardly. Your other two pillars in your strategy are usually, three, is ops, finance and IT, right? And absolutely still really, really critical. Ops are how we kind of deliver our core business, financials, and your IT is your infrastructure stuff. So the way we connect with people tends to come through brand and or people and culture. So getting that messaging right and doing it in a consistent way where it's meaningful. And again, it goes back to the thing on the shelf, amazing strategy, we've launched it, look everybody. And then no one looks at it again for 3 years. And they're like, oh, why didn't we achieve any of these things? Well, of course you didn't. Everyone's forgotten about it. When I started at an organisation, one of the first things the CEO said to me was, no one knows what the strategy is about and no one cares about it. What are you going to do about it? And it's true. Like people go, and I've had conversations when I've done consultation sessions with staff members in strategy development, and they're like, why do I care about strategy? It's just some document. It doesn't affect what I do every day. And you go, oh, that's a real, for us, strategy passionate people, it's a real kick, because we haven't demonstrated how it changes their day and their life. But of course it fundamentally does. Strategy is the thing that's defining all of your organisational decisions. Are you going to go through an M&A process? Are you going to expand? Are you going to downsize? Are you going to, move into new areas? All sorts of stuff. Creates opportunity for team members, creates change. So these are the things that are shaping the everyday employee's experience. But for the most part, we've done a terrible job with connecting strategy to what my job looks and feels like every day. So being really conscious of that. And if you're thoughtful about it, I was talking to a client 2 days ago about this, I call it an activation plan for strategy. How do we communicate it? That's almost lowest level, that's, emails and in your newsletters, but it's more so in language, when the CEO is talking, when their manager is talking, when we're having a meeting and we're talking about this thing and we link this, and we help them make the connection back to the strategy. So that's the communication piece. Connection is helping the person feel like they're having a contribution to it. So how do you help, particularly in large organisations, how do you help someone right over here who feels really disconnected from strategy see the line of connection with what they do and that strategic objective? At M&G, I feel like we did a really good job of this. Scott, the CEO, went around to every single team member and talked to them about it. Your job as accounts payable in contributing to the strategy is this here, and you contribute to this, which does this, which enables us to deliver the strategy. So what you do is really important, And hearing that from a CEO, having that explained and going, oh yeah, like I can connect with it now. It doesn't have to always be the CEO, but man, that's powerful. The more senior the person in the organisation who can have that conversation with an individual and go, you play a critical role in this strategy, and let me show you what that is. Enlivens people. It connects them to it, and they start talking about it and they start caring about it more. So that connection piece, and then the accountability piece is really essential. So instead of strategy, shelf, never seeing it again, how do you integrate the strategy into how you're holding your team members accountable? So back to performance review, I like to have any KPIs that an individual have are nestled into your strategic pillars and or purpose and values. So if what you're doing, if what we're asking from you doesn't line up to our strategic pillars or purpose, then why are we doing it? And as leaders and as people who are making organisational decisions, we need to ask ourselves that question. If we have a metric and it's not actually shifting the dial on our strategic objectives, why are we doing it? Are we just doing it because we've always done it? What's the actual value here? What's the strategic value? And then when we are creating role-specific measures, how do we clearly create connection that's going to move the dial? And then when you do this well, you see a whole group of people moving in one direction towards that strategic outcome. So super passionate about this, because if you do it well, it's incredibly powerful and organisations really achieve what it is they've set out to do.
Lovely. Most of the workforce now lives on LinkedIn. So I don't call the word social media. So social media is Instagram, whereas LinkedIn for me is a professional media. And it's professional CV and what people are doing. And then what are the things would make you cringe on LinkedIn?
I mean, it's tricky because everyone's got a different personal brand, right? And some people can do, face to camera videos and they just are authentic, and I love watching their videos and I hear from them. I try and do one and I feel like an idiot, so I cringe at myself and then delete it. So I think it's about what feels authentic for you and from that person. It's always going to be a little bit of accomplishment signalling because, as you say, it's a professional context and a professional environment where you are promoting yourself for professional kind of purposes. I think oversharing is probably a cringe for me when it starts to get really far away from a professional context and it feels more like a Facebook feed. Sometimes I see posts like that and that personally makes me a little bit cringy. What else is cringy? And I think, it's thinking about how we want to be perceived in every interaction that we're at online. When people use it as a place to badmouth or complain about things or just generally, criticise but not add anything helpful to the discourse, that's not something I'm a fan of, and I don't think particularly helps anyone. The things you do online are there forever. So people just being really conscious about that, you don't want to put a post about, maybe some personal belief you have and then you're applying for a job at a company that maybe is in contrast with that, right? So people just need to be very conscious and aware. And I think they are much better now compared to, say, 5 years ago. We do still, from a HR perspective, sometimes, the person person at a workplace calls in sick and then there's a photo on Instagram of them in Bali the next day kind of thing. So you still see some of those faux pas, but I think people have clued up and are a bit better about that now.
But LinkedIn has also become a tool to outwardly present as an organization your brand, what you stand for, and what kind of, not many organizations are doing it well. I love the feed from the feds, the federal police. the reason why I love it, they showcase not just employees, they showcase what they're doing, whatever catch they had, and they just show it up there, and just, so it's a good feed to a bit more knowledgeable rather than just, hey, we all employees having fun, but a bit more. So I like their feed, but which feeds do you like from an organization point of view? And then what do you see from a point of view of using LinkedIn to deliver your HR message, because employees or future employees are looking to be employed with you, and then what are things they should be thinking about?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of someone who I think is really good as an organisation, and I'm coming up blank at the moment. I'm sure there are really great organisations in my feed, just as a caveat.
Yeah, as you said earlier, Parliament of Australia.
Absolutely. I do like Kate Chaney's feed, actually. She puts some good stuff up. But what I think, if I come to the point around employees looking at your LinkedIn when they're considering you for a job, I still don't, and yes, the market still ebbs and flows, but as an overall, we still have kind of a war for talent, right? There's not enough people with really highly skilled in certain areas as there is vacancies. So we're kind of fighting over a talent pool. So there is your candidates, your people who are in the market have choice, and they're going to choose not just based on salary, package, those kind of things. They're going to choose based on, flexibility, work design, organisational culture, ability to progress. So how do you use any medium that you have as an organisation, your website, your LinkedIn, you might have an Insta account, whatever. How do you use that to tell those stories, And I think storytelling is really powerful. Not just, we are great. Yeah, because of course we're all going to say we're great, How do you actually demonstrate that through whether it's team members sharing their story? And it doesn't always need to be really high production. I actually think people like quite genuine content now, So I think I've seen some really nice, kind of campaigns, employee value proposition campaigns, where it's individuals talking in their own phone about, this is why I love it, and then the organisation kind of shows that. There was a really good post. It was from one of the mining companies, I think, around how someone had transitioned their career from a relatively entry-level, non-qualified, to going through and getting support to do their tertiary qualification, then ending up in a really senior role. Great story to tell, So how can we look for the great things happening in our organisation and shine the light on it and share that outwardly? Because that's the social proof, It's not just saying we're great with progression. Here, let us show you some really amazing things that we've done and how you can build a great career with us.
Mm-hmm. In conclusion, I want you to give us a bit more thoughts on that war on recruitment will only be solved by more supply, the supply side of it. What are the things as organizations, leaders in the States and in the country should be looking for things to create that oversupply, and not just of the people, but of the skills as well?
It's the supply and demand question is such a circular issue. I think it was a couple of months ago, I went to about 3 different kind of panel talks, was listening. I think one was a property council, one was a healthcare sector, so really varied sectors. And every conversation centred around, not having enough of a workforce, but the circular issue. And each group spoke about it from a different perspective, because sure, we can increase migration levels again, which is great because that solves the skilled, skilled worker kind of crisis, but then we don't have the housing supply. So we've kind of got ourselves at a large scale a bit stuck in Australia, in that we need those skilled professionals coming in, and migration is a really amazing way of doing that. But we haven't kept pace from an infrastructure perspective to enable that. So until we make some serious gains on that, we're only going to be able to allow certain amounts of migration because we haven't got the infrastructure right. So that needs to be resolved. We need to work on housing. We need to work on all of that. What I actually think is a key part of this solution, I think there's really poor technology adoption in Australia. I don't think we're maximising tools that can create efficiencies. I think there's a bit of fear. I think we're too busy to investigate it, so we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. So I think it's not going to solve the problem at all, but come on, let's work smarter. If we can't solve the skill shortage overnight, what levers can we pull? And let's get smarter about that. The other point that I like to talk to organisations about, instead of fighting over the same pool of people, make the pool bigger, build your own pool. I worked at an organisation and they had this really niche role with a really niche skill set. It was really hard to find. And historically, them and all their competitors had fought over this teeny tiny talent pool, and it was just no one ever had enough people. Everyone just kept jumping for an extra $5 an hour, and it was just chaos. Like, we weren't solving the problem. So, okay, we'll look at the problem differently. So what we've started doing is putting out, say, you need no experience. We're going to build an internal program to help you develop these skills. We're essentially going to give you an informal traineeship because it didn't require a formal qualification. And we're going to hire based on your ability to problem solve, work with other people, adapt to situations. And we actually recruited purely on those skills and then taught them all the skills that they need to do the job. And all of a sudden, we're not fighting over the same pool of people. We've made the pool bigger. We've kind of helped everyone. So I would encourage everyone particularly if you've got specific roles or areas where you're really struggling for talent, stop fighting over the same pool of people. Do something to change the game. Make the pool bigger. There are lots of people who would love an opportunity to build their career, level up, scale up, but don't have the luxury of not working for a year to go and do a course or something. So, be the solution. Don't keep contributing to the problem.
Thank you, Kat. Thanks a lot.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.